This is Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM. We are live streaming online, and we are now live on KTN Home for the next 2 hours. CT Muga, as we begin the hour, what did the sparrows say?
Well, let me take some literary license here and give the impression and understand what birds can say. The sparrow said, and remember, I was specific, not mighty sparrow, the calypso maestro, okay? The sparrow said that since the hunter has learned to shoot without missing, it has equally learned to fly without perching.
Okay. It's called just adapting. Adapt. So this one has learned to shoot without missing. So now I will fly without patching. Okay. Let us see how far you can fly, Mr. Sparrow. So let's talk about the BBI, okay? Now, since this hunter has learned to shoot, the Building Bridges initiative came after the handshake, March 2008, between two brothers. One of them is the president, the other one is the leader of the opposition, his biggest challenger in the just concluded general election. After that, there's all these questions of, so now, okay, so these two gentlemen shook hands. So what was supposed to happen next? And they said, all right, so we are now launching what we call the Building Bridges Initiative, so we can bring peace and harmony to the country. And they handpicked a group of men and women and told them, go around the country, listen to the people, and then come up with a report on what the people want and what the solution would be to our problems. They were given a 9-point agenda. We know how that has gone. There was BBI. One report came out. It was supposed to have gone through validation. It went through some political process of several rallies. There was BBI 2, which was launched again last year. And then there was all these questions of, so now surely this proposal that you are saying here, that you want even to take us to a constitutional referendum, we didn't agree on this. We don't think this would work. Then there's been what we call now BBI 3, BBI 3A, 3B. Is there an ombudsman in the judiciary? Is it to be appointed by the president? No. Is it what? All those things have happened in a process called the BBI. Now we're at a point where the secretariat that was established to go through the country and collect signatures in support of a people-led initiative on constitutional review took them to the IEBC. The IEBC says, we've gone through this, we've established the names given to us, and the details given to us are of voters who are in our register, and we've published them on our website. So it's there, published on the IEBC website, and they have to ask the public, now go and verify that this name that is there is actually yours, and you consent to being one of those who have said that you support the referendum. Several civil society organizations throughout this process have asked questions. Several political leaders have asked questions. Several professional bodies have asked questions about this. And we are at a point where all those are coming together to say, okay, so do we really have to amend the constitution at this point? Going by what the president says, we are at a constitutional moment. One of those organizations is the International Commission of Jurists Kenya chapter. We hosted the chairman at some point last year after the report was released, and he was raising the questions of, so throughout this process, let's look at how it has been financed. But this new statement by the ICJ Kenya is not even about the financing. It's about looking at the details of the Constitutional Amendment Bill itself and the report itself. And now we have the president, Mr. Kelvin Mogeni, who joins us on the line. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this time around.
So the ICJ Kenya has released a statement, and it says, look, from where we sit, having looked at this document, we say no to a constitutional amendment at this point. Why?
This has been a process. We have discussed variously about the contents of this document. From the inception, we have had discussions with the various parties, our members, constitutional experts, human rights players, and several actors in the justice sector. We have asked several questions about both the process and the outcomes that are intended to be achieved from this, deliberations that we have had. It is acknowledged that at the point, the country required certain interventions. But those interventions, we have always said, are already contained in the constitution that we already have. But the actors refused to confirm that those interventions could have been achieved without necessarily going to amend the constitution. So the biggest questions we have posed: how do you intend to amend a document you have failed to implement? And that is a big question on the table.
Mm-hmm.
There are very many issues that arise. So when you say you want to amend the constitution to bring a better document, and the one that is existing, you have failed to implement. So what gives you the thought that we are able to do or to implement the subsequent one that is coming after this amendment has been done? So we are saying this: show the public goodwill that this item the document you're bringing, you are likely to do better than that just doing what we call a cosmetic and public relation exercise.
Mm.
What we have said is that 95% of BBI does not require any constitutional amendment. It requires to be implemented through simple executive orders and legislative interventions that do not require a constitutional amendment. So the first issue that arises: these things that do not require constitutional amendment, have you done them? Do you intend to do them? What is the time frame for you to do that?
Mm-hmm.
So that has not been done, because all these things just require a simple intervention that does not require this referendum. So we're asking, if you are saying you want to give the counties 35%, can you do those? Can you do that immediately? So we say there is goodwill, but what we are saying is that deliberately they have refused to implement, so that you have a carrot and stick situation. If you agree to the referendum, then we'll give you these other things.
Right.
That's the carrot and stick situation we have on the table.
Kelvin, why now? Many have said that, even coming from, the heavy supporters of the BBI, is that, the train has left the station. So why do we hear from the ICJ at this point, making these recommendations that many would have made before, or that, could have come earlier? Why now, when it seems as though these things are already going through?
I don't think it is correct to say that we have made these statements now, because we have given our recommendations, our objections, our ideas on stage-to-stage basis. Mm-hmm. It is not that we have just woken up. Some people assume that ICJ has woken up and say this is what it is. We raised the questions on the process at the very inception. We sought to know what the financing and the process of undertaking this process was. Mm-hmm. We never got responses, and I believe that any party with goodwill ought to have come up with that openness at that point in time. Mm-hmm. Of course, nobody intended to respond because it was shrouded in secrecy. Mm. And they bulldozed their way and proceeded with that. When the first process of recommendation came up, we also sought interventions on the parties involved and how that process will be undertaken. We never got responses to that. Mm-hmm. And of course, we made our position known. Mm-hmm. When the first report came out, we pointed out the flaws that were in that first position. And we never got any responses to that. Mm-hmm. The first BBI document that was made public,
yep.
We also voiced our concerns on the very specific contents, especially in the intended constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. Few were taken in, especially in respect to the judiciary ombudsman. because initially the ombudsman was supposed to report to the executive.
Yeah.
They amended that, and it reports now to the Judicial Service Commission and Parliament. But what we have voiced more concerning the ombudsman is how you're going to have two constitutional bodies that are going to handle the same sector in the government. Then we'll have this, pull and shove situation that we have in the Ministry of Lands, the Executive and the National Land Commission, which ended up in the Supreme Court severally to give, interpretations as to what, or the mandate of each of them. So we don't want to have that repeat with respect to the judiciary. And we have voiced this, and we have said it before, that accountability is a requirement, and we want it in the judiciary. But we don't want to do it while eroding the gains that we already have in the judiciary. Because, access to justice is one of very, very pillars of democracy. And that's what you're saying. Let us have a situation that does not bring any controversy, that will remove all the gains that we have so far earned, in the last 10 years.
Sure. That
the civil society has fought so hard to ensure that they are embedded in this constitutional order that we have. So we don't work backwards. Let's work forward, ensuring that the gains we have, we strengthen them rather than eroding that process.
Kelvin, I think. Please go on.
Yeah, what I was saying is that the bulk of the intended amendments, as you look at them, are really directed towards the executive and the way we need to have the executive look in the coming days, and the composition of the legislature, and more so going by what Judge Maraga had advised the president to dissolve Parliament, because they have failed to meet the 2/3 gender threshold in the parliaments that have been there since the 2010 Constitution. So what we're saying is that you can't amend so that you're trying to bring in through the window what you have failed to do in the last 10 years. We've seen that there was no goodwill to implement the 2/3 gender rule. So how are we sure that in this new constitutional order, we're going to implement what you have failed to do?
Kelvin, I like what you're saying, and the pushback that the ICJ is giving is actually very ideal and appropriate. But let me ask this question. Is there a minimum threshold that any government must have before they can push for an amendment of the Constitution?
There is no question about a minimum threshold. We look at what we really have and look at how the process is being undertaken and whether we really have that push to take it further. Because when you talk about a minimum threshold, we have had a series of webinars, and this is, when you say that ICJ has not been involved in this process of reviewing and looking at the gains we have had in the last 10 years, we had several webinars running up towards the 27th August 2020 in what we call the Katiba at 10 series. We brought very, very many experts, including those both supporting and those opposed to, and various views were given. And what we came up with, and the most important thing that came out from the various discussions we had, is that we have failed to implement the Constitution because of certain outcomes that have not come from the executive. For example, you introduced that the public needs to have this Article 11A, which gives us the right to respond in certain ways as citizens. And we ask ourselves, if the executive does not comply with court orders, as it is right now, what is the new constitution that can compel them to obey those orders? As a minimum threshold, have we brought that issue in the government that they can obey processes that are already in place? So that's what we fear, that if there is no goodwill from the existing processes, how do you intend us to have goodwill in the subsequent one that are intended to come? So we're saying, tekeleza katiba sasa. Then we talk about amending what is not workable.
After you've seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Mr. Mogeni, I have to ask you again, but perhaps let me rephrase this question. If you were to say tekeleza katiba, fulfill the dictates of the katiba, and then talk about the changes, I have to ask, is there any country on the planet that has actually fulfilled the dictates of all that it has in its constitution before making amendments?
Most countries we work constitutions in terms of how it works and how it does not work. Because when you look at situations that are not workable, amendments come in. You work amendments on situations that are not workable. We are asking ourselves, and we have repeated this, that you have not fully implemented it. You have failed to implement it. So you cannot say that we have set a threshold when we have not reached the minimum bar. So what we have done right now, and I think what we asked in our current constitutional situation is that we want to avoid the winner-take-it-all situation that happened in 2017, 2013, and the like, and also the issue that came up in 2007, 2008. That is the big elephant in the house.
Yep.
So what we ask ourselves, and the reason why I'll say this in the bedrock of what you have asked me as to whether there is a country that has fully implemented the constitution in the process, we ask ourselves, if the reason that we had the BBI, the handshake, is to bring together people and avoid the winner-take-it-all situation, what do we have in the intended amendment that can avoid that situation? So my question will be, does it resolve the crisis? I'll give an example. In the South African Constitution, parliamentary, or rather political parties, are given percentages in representation on the basis of the actual votes gained or gathered in the process towards elections. So that if we had that situation in Kenya, if ODM garnered 25 votes, Jubilee got 27 votes, so each will have 27 members and the other 25 votes.
Yep.
25 members. So, you are talking about proportional representation that will avoid a splintered, where people who have voted are not represented because they only got maybe a fraction of the vote, so they are not generally represented. So we look at a pattern like that, where representation becomes real and distributed to ensure that everybody's voice is heard. And when you hear 1 vote, 1 shilling, that is a similar scenario we are talking about. So if we are looking at a situation where we want every party to be represented, I'll ask the parties in the BBI to reconsider the documents they have set out right now, because if you talk about the president appointing a prime minister from the party with the majority, and the same party appoints cabinet ministers based on that position, then at the end of the day, we'll still have the current situation, because it does not address the question of representation, where it does not bring in the various interests.
So the winner still takes all.
Yeah, that we have said that.
But hearing you go like that, Mr. Mogeni, goes into what exactly the proponents of the BBI are saying, that we need to amend the constitution. Because remember, even when the president speaks, he says one of the biggest things that is behind the push for this constitutional amendment is on that political front. Others are additionals, but the main thrust of this is that political front, how to address the peace and stability of the country, how to ensure there is that inclusivity, that everybody feels that they participate and they are represented. So then it means that whatever is in the current constitution does not address that, then there is need for us to think of something that would address that particular emerging need. Then isn't that to say that there is need for that BBI conversation to happen and a constitutional referendum?
We've had that conversation, and we have said that issues of representation are very paramount. the only question we ask, the document we so far have, does it address that situation? And I'm waiting, and we have had discussions with this. We have had various conversations, and the outcome is the same. There is no address onto the current lacuna that we have in the current constitution to address that issue of, be it tribal or economic or other vices that we have in the country today. So that position will persist irrespective of the amendment. So are we curing anything? So I go back to the same question and I pose it this. How are we going to have the inequalities in terms of representation that led to the hiccups that we had in 2017, leading to the parallel swearing in, or the issues that we had in 2007, 2008. And then we look at it this way. We have had, and it's an illustration. You cannot deny that this country sometimes is structured around tribal lines. And this situation we have asked us, how can we cure this question for posterity?
How can we?
That's the question is. And I've said this. We cannot talk about rotation of prejudice because that is ridiculous. It cannot work in Kenya. And neither are we going to have to address it by having this, what is called, coalition of tribes. And the only issue we could have had is to strengthen the political party process, which we have failed to do. And I'll ask you this. When we got the BBI, we got a handshake of two political parties. No, let me not say two political parties. Two players in political parties. Now, the other players within the political process were not given audience. And when you talk about legalities, the persons involved in those political processes were not given audience. So was there justice within the political processes that we are trying to strengthen? And I'll say this, strengthen the political party processes so that we have rank and file. Like in the US, the Democrats, the Republicans have got very, very good strengthened mechanisms. When are we going to have that in Kenya? Because every political process, cycle that we have new political players, new political parties. And they keep on emerging every circle of the political life in the country. Which means what? We have instability in our political process every electoral cycle. How and when are we going to strengthen this? Because we had NAC, we had ODM, we had,
PNU,
we had
NAC Kenya.
DNA, we had NAC Kenya. We have had these metamorphosizing political parties because we have failed to strengthen the political process in Kenya. And so long as that is not done, however many constitutional orders you have, you will never have a stable political process in the country. And the issue will remain, how do you strengthen the political process? We avoid the briefcase parties, tribal parties, and the breakaway parties because I do not agree on certain processes because today the leader here is not good with me. Tomorrow I want to be the leader of the other party.
But Mr. Mogeni, wouldn't you say that the very argument you're putting across, I like it, is this not part of the process of strengthening this very same thing that you're saying? Because we are now becoming aware of things we were not aware of. We are being treated to an understanding of the Constitution in ways we would never have understood it. So don't you think that this debate and everything around it is actually useful in strengthening our political processes?
But is that the intention?
Unintended
it isn't unintended consequences, it's consequences. For instance, when you talk of an amendment, amendments arise, in my opinion, because something wasn't fully captured in the original document. So the amendment is supposed to rectify that.
I hear what you're saying, but maybe Kelvin can talk about this because what you're saying is that you want people to be more involved. You
Yes.
want people to be more involved. So now, with this debate and the way it's going in the back and forth, is that people inadvertently get involved by this discourse that we have. People get involved. People get involved in the process. You don't lock people out. So it's a consequence of the manner in which this whole discourse is being
In fact, the
carried
ICJ
out.
may not recognize it, but they are helping this very process. The thing that they're hoping would happen is actually happening when they engage the government, when they engage political parties, when they engage the public with this discourse. The very thing that they're saying should happen is actually happening. That's what I'm saying.
So, should we now not have
I-
a way of capturing all those things that are happening before we go to a referendum?
That is a different
And
discussion.
I think when what you're saying should be looked from the fact that the intended outcomes must be looked in terms of where the lacuna is at the moment, and that's what we have failed to do.
Okay.
When you talk about the problems in this country, which are very political, you ask yourself, have we strengthened the political party process, and how do we ensure that we don't have this lacuna? And that is really the big elephant in the house, the political process. Because if today we decide that these political parties and these other parties are going to be in this particular way, and they agree, we'll have really little problems. But you see, when you see, like, even in the Third Way Alliance, somebody decided, no, this is my party. They kick out the other party. So tomorrow you'll hear somebody else saying, no, I don't have audience in
ODM.
in ODM. I'll go and form something else. Because we have failed to follow the dispute resolution mechanisms, because we don't care about that. How do we strengthen the political party processes in the Constitution? We embed them in the Constitution so that it is strengthened. Look at the register of political parties or that forum. It is not embedded in the Constitution. IEBC does not have enough powers to rein all this because it's also strangled financially.
Very many problems.
All those are there, but how can we address that? And we address them in the new Constitution, in the internal Constitution.
Okay.
Nothing comes out of that. Yeah.
Kelvin Mogeni, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We've seen the statement from the ICJ Kenya. We'll be engaging you further and further as we move closer and closer to this, what seems to be the way we're heading, a constitutional referendum. I know that ICJ has said no to this, and you're saying tekeleza katiba sasa, that is, implement the 2010 constitution. We thank you very much for this and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Eric, and all the others, and thanks for this.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Kelvin.
you very much.